Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of branding in the digital customer journey with our special guest, Rachael Sullivan. But before I begin, as always, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're on YouTube, hello YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, click on the bell notification so you can get up to date with all the episodes that come out every Tuesday. So, importance of digital branding, importance of branding as part of the digital customer journey with Rachael Sullivan. Welcome, Rachael.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on the podcast, Manny.
We were talking about this before we came up to start recording. It's been about 5-6 years, hasn't it, since we last caught up? But I know we've been in contact on LinkedIn. So I know people listen to my podcast and connect on LinkedIn because they then turn around and said, oh, can I be a guest on the podcast? So thank you for joining us. And you are currently MD owner of Theodore Communications, correct?
I am, yeah. It's a brand and marketing strategy company that I co-found with Kat Martin, another person from our past. And yeah, we're a small consultancy specialising in brand strategy and marketing strategy.
I think it's a good topic because I've mentioned this on a few episodes now about branding. I even did a very, very important episode called Brand versus Performance. When it's not brand versus performance, it should be brand and performance. And that was the whole point of the podcast. But just to give some experience and background of yourself to our listening and watching audience, tell us how you got to Theodore Communications, where you work.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for 20 years now. Hate saying that. Yeah, started in 2003. My experience is pretty much half and half, agency side, half client side. So I've worked for some really big brands, client side, like British Airways, Qantas, Vodafone as head of brand and head of performance.
Yeah.
And I think what's probably quite different about my experience from a strategy point of view and where I got to strategy is I started in brand just before digital became big, so like 2006, and I got moved onto the digital aspect of the brand team because I was the youngest, and then kind of led to working in social media, performance, one-to-one communications, and then about 2014-15 came back to strategy, got a master's in behavioural psychology to really add to the consumer strategy element, and then went back agency side, and then created Theodore from getting made redundant in the pandemic and having a child and just needing a little bit more control over my work-life balance and hours, but that doesn't always happen being an owner of an agency. But I'm going for it.
We literally just, I kind of like, we record a couple of episodes each time we record, and we record every couple of weeks, which is good frequency for us. And I kind of went on a rant, and I'm looking at Callum here on one of the second points, talked about the challenges of running an agency. It was all about recruitment and staffing. Exactly. Honestly, that episode, we're going to bring it out at some point, but if it doesn't make me go viral, there you go. But we're not here to talk about it. We'll talk about your experience in strategy and branding. And it's a great story because, like, as you know, with my background, I left into marketing, as you know, back 2017 now. It makes it sound like these lucky years ago now. It's like, I know, Josh, you left just before I left, didn't you? You left in 2016.
That's when I started, 2016. Yeah.
Josh was working in the media team video team upstairs where I was in Headingley. And we crossed over a little, I believe. And because I was meant to be in, but I was on dialysis, so I couldn't really be in. And then I decided to go forward Bobble Digital. And I always feel like it's, as you just said, like pandemic, you ended up having a child, so congratulations on that one. And it's something like that spurs you on to say, you know what, F it, I'm going to go forward with it. I have the experience, I have the know-how, I'm going to go forward with it. And you've got to focus on your own brand as well when you're building out. So let me start there. Why Theodore? Tell us about what does that name mean?
Oh, good question for the first one. So naming a brand, really difficult exercise. You've probably been through it yourself. Loads of different names. We couldn't really land on one. And then we thought about what are the strengths that Kat and I bring together as a duo. Kat's super ordered, like organised, and I have the theory and the background. So working on some really big brands, got a degree in marketing, but also really bring that theory from psychology, from the masters in the coaching world. So when we kind of played with those two names, theory and order, as our USP, the name Theodore popped up. It was also the name that both of us liked for our little boys. It was like second on the list. And when you have your own business, it's like your second baby. So there you are. The business is my second child as well.
Bobble's my child. It is back to my childhood nickname, Bobble. So mine was easier to come at.
I love that.
It was, I forget his name now. He was at Inner Marketing, did my branding as well. I'll remember, it is in an old podcast somewhere. But I want to talk about, the art of branding today, what makes a good brand. So tell us a bit about that whole segment. We're in a post-pandemic world. We're in a world where, you see it like Yves Saint Laurent and Burberry, they've become more, I want to say, standardized with their branding and logo, where they're all kind of similar. If you ask me to differentiate between a lot of these high, brands now, the format, the logo is all the same. So what is the art of branding today and what makes a good brand?
So probably the best place to start is like a definition of brand and branding. It's an oldie but a goodie. My favourite definition of branding is Anita Roddick, founder of the Body Shop's definition, which is it's the space that we hold in people's minds. And when you think about it, what does the word space mean? It's what are the rational and emotional connections with that brand? So what can we see, hear, touch, feel? What's the experience? And how is that absorbed in the limbic system? Like what's the emotional memory? And that's where brand awareness comes from. So in its essence, it's that space we hold. Now, back when I started out in marketing and worked on the brand team at British Airways, brand was the TV ad, brand was the story that the agency told on TV. Today, brand is not the story. Like, it's so hard to control the brand narrative. Brand is the story that our customers say about us when they're with other people. And that's the space that brand is. It's ever more complex today, but ever more exciting because it's so different. And I think it's interesting you talked about those other brands. I think when the world gets ever more complex, we try and make things simpler. And I don't think that there's a surprise that brands are going back to try and be simpler today visually through their wording, because you're fighting so much harder for that emotional space in that limbic part of your brain.
And a lot of that is probably to do with the amount of ads and brands they see every day now compared to what we used to see 10, 15 years ago. We didn't have the tech we have now. When we were at, if we talk about Gen Z and, the next generation, but, when they were like 13, 14, they had mobile phones or on social media and the early adopters of Instagram and TikTok. When I was 13, 14, I'd get on my bike and go ride out and still doing a paper round. So,
I had a paper round.
Yeah. Good pocket money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something the younger generation could learn about in terms of getting some experience. Sorry, Josh is laughing at me. He knows I'm not going to let that one go. Showing our age. But yeah, it's like the differentiation is that like we were adapted, our generation adapted to technology. That generation was born in technology. So like even now I see my nephew who's 2 knows how to use YouTube on an iPad but can't string a sentence together yet, and knows what kind of videos visually that he wants to watch in terms of kids on YouTube Kids and stuff. So we see so much now compared to what we used to. You're right. How do you fight for that space? And it comes at seasonal points as well. That's why ads get more creative. And you have John Lewis, who then started to be more creative with their ads to make it more memorable. It's how are you going to stick in someone's head? So what process or system should a company follow to create a good brand?
Yeah. So I did listen to the podcast that you've done on brand versus performance. Do you see what I have listened? So the framework that we use for our process with doing any brand strategy is Simon Sinek's 3 circles, the golden circle. So starting with why your brand exists, what's the USP of your brand, what makes it different, and what your company does and for whom. So we do use that framework and we start with that framework, but it's just a guide. Like, what do you actually put and wrap around that process to make it a robust brand strategy today in a really complex world. So how we add to that in our brand process would be we'd start with the 4 C's. So what is the environment in which your brand is operating in? And would really advocate that anybody starting a brand strategy start there. So those 4 C's being, first up, the company. So what's your company strategy? What's your business strategy? I love listening to what you guys talk about when you're talking about performance strategy. If somebody won't share your business objectives, your financials, we're not going there with them. Like, a brand strategy is part of your business strategy. So we really have to understand the company. At Theodore, we insist at this stage that we'd work with the founder, MD, CEO. I think for brand, you have to be working at that C-suite. Otherwise, it's not going to work, no matter how big the company is. The second C would be what's going on for your customer. And obviously there's a whole minefield of data that you can get there, but what are they saying? You know, the good, the bad, the ugly. If you won't engage in all of that, again, you're turning yourself off to some potential insight there. The third part is the competitor analysis. So who are you competing with? What other space do consumers that you're fighting for? What's the brand message that you're competing with in their minds? What are they saying about? And we do all kind of analysis on what are there, what, how, and why, and are they following the golden circles? And then the fourth element being cultural. So what's going on in the cultural marketplace? And this is where I think brand and strategy get really interesting and important now, and why you have to look at them so much more, because you think about the cultural changes we've had in the last 3 years. Like, when I started out, you looked at a brand strategy maybe on your brand guidelines and redid them every 3 to 5 years. Like, you need to be looking at your brand strategy every year now, because the cultural context that we're operating in, it's like one crisis after another. And it's changing the context in which a brand operates in. So that'd be the first input that we'd look at. So that's the first part of our process. The second part is to workshop the 3 circles, the golden circles for Simon Sinek. And then really to make a robust brand strategy now, the framework that we use is 4 pillars that then follows that. And I'll try and fit in where performance comes into this. It might be helpful for your listeners. So the first pillar, after you've done your 3 circles, is in this brand framework, is what's your customer value proposition? And that is different from your how, because this is what is the value exchange at its simplest form that you're giving with your customer. And usually it's about meeting a need, and it's usually some element of price, i.e. are you the most expensive and premium in the market, or are you going to discount on price? And that's where the bulk of performance activity comes in. But again, thinking about your customers in that first pillar, they only engage with you in that pillar when they know they've got the need, or they're super rational customers. And my husband is one of these. He won't buy anything unless he's researched it, whereas I'm a more emotional purchaser. I'm intuitive. It's got to feel right. He will research everything. So that first pillar is really nutting out your customer value proposition and getting a really clear statement and offer for that. The second pillar is your disruptor pillar. So this aligns to the how in the Simon Sinek circles, and it's usually a more elaborate, it's where the creative guys or girls get really excited, and it's usually your big above the line campaign or your big disruptive brand message. So what makes you different? What fights for that emotional space and that connection in the mind of the consumer? What will make somebody switch? What's the reason, or how do you create the need you didn't know you had, right? And this is the thing. They're the 2 pillars that I think marketers today still over-focus on. Like, they're super important, but they're where we tend to focus, and most brand marketing tends to focus. Where I get excited is the next 2 pillars. The third one is the authentication pillar. So what's your right to operate in this space? And this is where digital customer journey comes in. And this is how you behave. Like, what does your brand do when nobody's looking? What's the customer journey? Like, how do you represent your brand, not just on the ads or on the front of your website, but at all touch points? How do your staff engage with your customers? What are the internal processes? What's your right to be there? What's your environmental stance? What's your heritage? Like the authentication story. And we see that play out a lot on social media. We see that in a lot of like behind the scenes footage or the About Us section of websites. But I think there's a really important place for that in a brand strategy. And then the final pillar is the one that we didn't need until the internet existed, but we massively need it now. And that's your brand affinity. How do you build brand love? And that's your trust builder. So what's the story your customers are telling that you have no control of, but you can be part of? And how do you take that further forward? So it might lend itself to your influencer strategy. It might be your Trustpilot reviews, but it might be how a really good brand like Spotify starts to use that data in their actual customer value proposition and their disruptor one, like the Justin Bieber ad with, sorry, what did you do? Yeah. and I think that's when you ladder all those 4 pillars together, that's what makes a really robust brand today.
Yeah, there's a lot of points in there that stem out, especially the last 2. And I agree with you. I think today companies tend to focus on the first 2 pillars more than anything else. And it's that final pillar is like, it's like, what are people saying about you, where you have no control over? And that's where, someone will talk positively or negatively about your brand based on the experience they've had with your brand. But then that relates directly to the 3rd pillar, where it's like, well, how the multiple touch points of your brand go into customers and everybody in terms of, we do it now. Like I always say, this Bobble pod is part of that pillar. It's like that authenticity.
Exactly.
I have the experience. This is what I'm talking about. People buy into people as much as they do in terms of services. There was a famous, I saw a really great post on LinkedIn. It's like, a customer will become a friend quicker than a friend becomes a client. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of our customers have become good friends where we will do things outside of elements, but that's because they've bought into the multiple touch points and that level of service. But it's not always, some elements you have control over, and that's why you need certain processes and systems in place to make sure that everything that's coming from top down is proficient. And some people might say, well, it needs to be bottom up. But there has to be a hybrid model. Bottom up has to feed back in terms of what top down is doing, as opposed to, start from the bottom and build it up. I just think it has to come from, like you said, when you go in, you work with the C-suite straight away, because you want to work with the MD, the CEO, the founders, etc., because they understand why they set up the company. They are the authenticators. They're the ones that have, that they almost are the brand to some degree. You are your brand of, Theodore, you and Kat. I am the brand of Bobble Digital. Elon is now the brand of like Tesla and SpaceX and, other elements. Mark Zuckerberg is the brand of Meta. He gets mentioned with Meta all the time. So you have to apply like a physical person sometimes to a brand, but it's all about the strategy. So you've talked about the 4 C's, the golden circles, and the 4 pillars. So why is strategy and making time for strategy important?
Well, I think that comes into what I talked about before around the environment, be changing so much recently. I mean, strategy's always been important in that if your brand and marketing strategy isn't aligned to your business strategy, it doesn't matter what your performance is, it's not pulling in the right direction. Why I think strategy is ever more important now is we're all time poor, and we're even more time poor. And it's really easy to forget strategy in view of tactics, because we want to see outcome and productivity, but we're not always checking we're going in the right direction. And I think back to, I think about a lot of the bigger clients we work with. There's a lot of rework now, and I think we're seeing a lot more rework because we're not looking back to strategy often enough. And I think particularly with how much things are changing, you need to be almost checking in with your strategy quarterly, which is certainly what we'd advocate with clients. I mean, I'll give you one example very quickly now. We talk about brand, and we talk about 2 factors in branding at its core. You've got what's your purchase driver, and then what's your purchase consideration. I've got a 4-year-old, right? Tomato ketchup is like biblical in my house, right?
Tomato ketchup, don't they?
18 months ago, my purchase driver for ketchup was, mealtime, food shopping, that's it. See red, know it's Heinz, right? Grew up on Heinz, beans means Heinz, rings in my ear. My only purchase driver, my only consideration set is grab it off the shelf, right? At this point, I think ketchup was £2. It was an amount of money that didn't even register with me. Fast forward to today, totally different, right? My purchase driver hasn't changed. Child still hungry, wants ketchup. My child's 4, doesn't recognise Heinz yet. That's only comes from me, mum wanting to do what's best. My consideration drivers are all different because ketchup's nearly £5 now in the supermarket. Yeah, that face. It's extortionate. Now, at what point in the last 18 months did I just stop automatically reaching for Heinz? And I have. And I've actually gone to Lidl's own or Aldi's own that's only 85p. Now, what Heinz aren't understanding is, think of those 4 pillars that I just said. They had me at all of them 18 months ago. The economy's changed. My share of wallet's changed. £5 now for ketchup. I'm going on authentication. I bet you're still making 25, 30% profit because you're selling it at that, if not more. And that's starting to erode my trust in it, starting to erode my brand affinity. I'm starting to like Lidl and Aldi better because they're still selling their ketchup that my son can tell no difference in for 89p. And all of a sudden, brand trust is eroded. But have they reviewed their strategy? I'm not sure.
Shows how simple pricing can impact a decision maker. No, it's true because people are becoming more savvy and brands like Lidl and Aldi play on that, especially with Aldi's advertising where they're like, I could have this one, but I'd rather have this one because it's the same thing, but just at a different price point.
Price, it's knowing that tipping point in pricing because I was happy to pay 100% more on price up to a certain amount, right? What am I willing to pay 400% more? No. So everybody's got their cost. A brand is valuable to me at double, triple the price. Quadruple? No way.
No, you're right. It's important. And that impacts everything from a digital perspective as well. So when we look at the importance of branding in a digital customer journey is there's so many new entrants to, let's take e-com, for example. There's so many new entrants to e-commerce that you see the ads on Instagram, TikTok, social media, YouTube, Google ads, the amount of competition. So if you want to buy phone cases now, you could get a phone case from Amazon. You won't even know who the brand is or what it is. You will see that, okay, I need a case. This one has this one. This one has X amount of reviews, so I'll go for this one. So stuff like Trustpilot and elements like that really impact brand because if I go to a website that I've never heard the brand before, I say, oh, they've got 1,000 plus Trustpilot reviews. Let's have a look at that. Let's see if I can actually trust a brand that would never come. And that comes back to the pillars in terms of what are your customers saying about you for when people are finding you as a new brand, what to say. So it changes with digital because there's so many new entrants into different sectors all the time. How do you differentiate your brand online as well?
So again, I think on that, it's about which pillar are you playing in. It's like you've read my mind. Actually bought a phone case the other day.
Yeah.
If you're purely in price, you're going to go to Amazon, aren't you? And you're going to choose the one with the offer and you're playing in that customer value. The need is you just need a phone case. There'll be a section of the market that you might want to choose to only differentiate on price on that. And you're going to go lowest price. If you want to be a little bit more disruptive, obviously people are willing to spend 20, 30, 50 pounds. You can buy a really nice Mulberry phone case. And what you might play on there nods into the authentication. So it might be, what's it made of? What are the environmental creds? Is it made of recycled plastic? Is it recyclable? Can it be dropped out of a helicopter?
Yeah.
We see all these ads on.
Yeah,
now,
okay.
I have been influenced by that off an Instagram ad. How robust is it? Especially if you've got children. Can you drop it in the bath? Can you, can it, has it got antibacterial properties?
Screen protection.
Screen protection.
So people can't see
there's
what you're
things
doing.
you can play on with that. And then into that final pillar, which is around the brand affinity, that's when your Trustpilot reviews might come on board, or what influencer's using it. Has it got a different design? Can you personalize it? But again, it's how much do people care and being really clear on what customers you're going after.
But from a business perspective, if you're an e-com or whether you're B2B, is you have to do those elements because you have to hit all those different touch points. You can't just be like, no, we're only going to, even if you are the cheapest phone cases on the market and that's what you want to focus on, that's fine. But, your reviews will be lower because it's going to be cheaper, which means you're going to get more returns, but you're still going to have to hit the other elements in terms of building your brand, telling customers why they should come to you, for example, and all those other wider things. Use all the digital channels available to you, from social media to, blogs, video, content on your site, off your site, to tell people that, those people in that market that just want a quick, cheap phone, yep, I can go here. But then that's why Amazon's good, because Amazon, you can get premium products, but you can get I can get a phone case, I can get a card for like £1 delivered next day to my house for a click of a button. So if I'm doing more research or less research, one website like Amazon has it all for me. I can take my time looking at the reviews and seeing how many people buy and look at the more premium products. But then if I'm not fussed about how much I spend and I just want something that does the job quickly, then I will just look at what's the cheapest that's got the most reviews, bang, tick, click, buy. As simple as that. But if it didn't have the reviews, if it didn't have all these elements, it didn't have all those purchases, it means I'm not going to buy that product very, very quickly if I'm at that position where I'm just like, okay, I just need that one. I don't care about it's £2. I know there's one I can get for £10, but that £2 one will do. That's fine. Other people said it's okay. If it breaks, I don't care. I can get another one at £2 as long as it lasts me 6 months instead of me buying one for £10 and it breaking after 18 months. The cost analysis then makes a lot more sense and people don't care. So you talked about, and I just want to quickly highlight this, is that people should update the strategy annually, once a year. Before you used to do it every 3 to 5 years, but why annually now?
Just because the rate of change is so much faster. That context, the market context that we're operating in, the Heinz example, things are moving so quickly. You can't make assumptions now about what's going on in your customer's life without testing it. And the same with competitors. You might have had a competitor set a year ago that's changed totally now, and then the space you hold in the consumer's mindset has totally changed.
Yeah. So we got to wrap up, but I want to ask, I always ask every one of my guests, if there's one tip or takeaway you want the audience to leave with from this podcast, from everything you mentioned today, what would it be?
I'll throw in a new one.
Okay,
about the digital journey and branding. And I think this was something that I was schooled on, when I was just started out in the industry. And I think it just gets really overlooked today. I think if you work in marketing now and you're working on a brand, I think you should order your product every week or every month minimum and do the service. I think we make assumptions in the customer journey, particularly where brand is concerned, that things are happening and that the consumer is getting a certain experience. You would be shocked. I think most clients are shocked when the first thing we do is we order the product and then we order it again a week later and we order it again the week later, and we show how the journey differs, what the packaging looks like, what the email journey was, map it all out. And I think when you actually get into the habit of looking at that month on month and seeing what the customer sees, you will spot really quickly where brand falls down across that entire journey. I think that would be my top tip for anybody in marketing. Order your own product like a customer does, and literally lay it out as a journey.
There's a film with Anna Hathaway and Robert De Niro called, I think, is it The Intern?
Yeah.
She did that with her product, then went straight in because she wasn't happy with how it was packaged. So she was ordering products as well. So instantly when he said that, it reminded me of that.
First thing we do, and there's always 4 changes to make straight away, where the client's like, no, that's not the packaging. I'm like, well, that's the packaging I got. We haven't paid for that packaging. We've paid for that. Well, what's gone off? Also, when you get your emails, reply to the email, look at this email, go through it. There's holes everywhere in the journey that need to be tightened and tweaked. So that would be my top tip. Consume the product.
Consume the product that you provide to customers. Much more difficult from a B2B perspective. You're not going to order your platform or software, but you should be using your platform and software and getting other people that you trust to use it in feedback, or have high value customers to feedback, or even give your product free to a few people on the basis that they're going to feedback every week or every month in terms of the problems they're facing with the platform or service, if that's what it takes to make improvements.
Just on that, one of the services we offer for B2B clients is that we'll do customer interviews with their clients, because when you as the provider of the service ask for feedback in a B2B environment, people are usually too nice. And so what we do is we do a service where we'll actually quiz your clients for you. I use the behavioural psychology to really get in and go, what could they improve on? And so that's quite a nice option as well. Yeah.
Third party input. So thank you for being on our podcast, Rachel. It's been very, very insightful. We recorded a bit longer than we wanted to, but I'm happy for the audience and the listeners and the viewers to get the full value from the podcast. We don't really put a time limit on it, but thank you for everyone who's been watching and listening. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe on all our platforms. And if you've got any questions for myself or Rachel, tag us at Bobble Digital. Use the hashtags Mr. Bobble, Ask Bobble, and Bobble Pod, and we'll get back to you. And this episode will be out very, very shortly. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.